Welcome to this episode of Tap Into an Expert. Today, I'm super excited. We're going to be unlocking mid-funnel retail media opportunities and the power of loyalty programs. So I think that this is an area that doesn't get nearly enough attention. You always hear about top of funnel and what's happening there and bottom of the funnel conversion, and it's missing a very important part of the consumer journey. So we're going to talk about how can brands maximize every stage of retail media funnel to drive growth from initial awareness all the way to conversion and loyalty. And we're exploring how brands could create a seamless journey for shoppers, not just at the point of purchase, but at every critical touch point in between. In this episode, we're going to learn how mid-funnel strategies could drive new product launches, boost high-value actions, and enhance the effectiveness of your bottom funnel efforts. We will also unpack the pivotal role of loyalty programs in building lasting customer relationships and supercharging retail media performance. Before we dive in, let me introduce you to our guest, Rick Tan. Rick is a recognized expert in retail media strategy, known for helping brands unlock new growth through innovative marketing approaches. With years of experience guiding both emerging and established brands, Rick brings a unique perspective on how to leverage mid-funnel tactics and loyalty data for maximum impact. Rick brings 15 years of experience in growth and marketing leadership. Most recently, he spent 3 years at Meta, leading business growth marketing. Before that, Rick spent over a decade in retail and e-commerce at Sam's Club, Walmart, Under Armour, and Walgreens. Rick's expertise spans CRM, loyalty, performance marketing, and digital innovation, making him a leading voice in retail media and customer engagement. So Rick, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
By the end of this episode, we will hopefully understand how a full funnel retail media approach can guide customers from awareness to conversion and beyond. You'll take away actionable use cases and learn how to harness loyalty programs for measurable results. So let's dive in. Rick, for listeners new to the concept, can you explain what mid-funnel means, particularly in retail media, and how it differs from what we typically hear about with higher intent or bottom of the funnel that most brands are familiar with?
Yeah. So, mid-funnel as a whole, I would say some organizations characterize it a bit differently, but the way I define it is it refers to the efforts that are focused on influencing consideration, where shoppers are maybe not ready to buy. Maybe there's a product or a category or brand that they're thinking about. They're waiting for a sale and they're not ready to make that purchase. Obviously there's a lot of emphasis right now in retail media on bottom of the funnel that's really focused on converting, driving that high intent traffic at a good ROI. But this is really around filling demand at the right moments when they're purchasing products. Some of the ways that plays out in retail media are on-site display, shoppable video, branded content, things that inspire them during seasonal moments particularly are really important.
And so why do you think that the mid-funnel strategies, because we hear about those things, we hear about, obviously for us, our entire focus is video on PDPs, video on site, but they're not talked about as their own strategy. Why do you think that they're underutilized in retail media?
I think there's two sides of it. I think the first side is agency and brands are really wired to treat retail media, similar to do with the Google and Meta as a performance channel. Last click attribution, short-term ROAS. And then on the retail side, they're very much focused on, category awareness. So I think it's a bit of a ancestral nature of the channel itself. There is obviously a lot of perceived value coming from the bottom of funnel because it's very measurable. It's easier to kind of work with your finance teams, your leaders to share, like, this is how much we spent, this is what we got from it. And it's measurement's super straightforward because it's all last click. Mid-funnel, on the other hand, it just requires a lot more nuanced, balanced approach, and it can feel less immediate and harder to justify in plans for finance leaders as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the measurement is everything, obviously, with advertising, with marketing, and specifically with retail media. And we're going to get into some of that with why loyalty programs offer such robust data and ability to measure. But you are right, like the top of the funnel, it's impressions, right? It's who's driving traffic and how much traffic. And at the bottom of the funnel, it's purely conversion. So I could imagine that the mid-funnel, which is, again, such a critical part of the consumer journey, being very difficult to measure. Have you seen that that's changing? Is that getting easier? Are there more solutions for measuring it? How are you tying it in to show its effectiveness on its own?
Yeah, I would say a lot of retailers are investing in better tooling, better capabilities, things like clean rooms, incrementality testing, full funnel analytics to really showcase From a retailer's perspective, you want the brands to get value from it. And from the brand's perspective, they need to be able to justify the cost. And the simplest ways to do that is provide better measurement on both sides to be able to demonstrate, how that's helping fuel demand at PDPs, how it's helping drive more down funnel conversions. And I would say we're still super early. I would say some retailers are better than others, but that's definitely a near-term step that's needed to be able to prove out the viability of a mid-funnel.
And that quickly brings us to segment 2, which is mid-funnel marketing and bridging awareness and purchase. So let's kick things off talking about the heart of the mid-funnel. According to Sky, retail media networks are uniquely positioned to influence decision-making during the consideration phase, using placements like product detail pages, personalized promotions to keep brands top of mind as shoppers evaluate their options. I guess that's really what you're talking about, that mid-funnel is that consideration part. So as stated by Amazon Ads, brands that invest in mid-funnel solution, such as what you mentioned earlier, video ads, customer reviews, targeted displays, it could help guide customers from curiosity to preference. So how can brands best bridge that gap between awareness and purchase in a very crowded retail landscape? So what are some of the most effective mid-funnel placements or tactics that you're seeing brands use to move customers closer to that purchase?
Yeah, there's a number of different use cases I've seen where there's been success tied to a mid-funnel to help amplify lower funnel. And, ultimately, it's really going to vary against the categories, the brands, and the retailers. You'll see some bigger box retailers who are like the bigger Procter & Gamble's, Coca-Cola's of the world employ different strategies versus smaller, fewer SKU organization. But, here's a few areas where I think are really non-regrettable. Introducing new items or categories. If you're a brand, larger brand or a smaller brand, you're introducing new items, either a seasonal version of Peeps, which, we've seen those all in the stores, or a seasonal version of a soft drink brothers for Easter. I think that's like a perfect opportunity there because you're introducing new items and categories, and obviously you want to drive that shelf demand, both in store and online. Highlighting upcoming promotions. Obviously Memorial Day is coming up soon, and you want to highlight things that are upcoming. This was a perfect opportunity to be able to promote things like mattresses, and letting them know this is the best in market sales. Because obviously as a retailer, you're trying to drive these comp events, but also as a consumer, you're looking for those items to buy that you may have had on your wish list for some time, when to know to buy them. Other things I've noticed as being really successful is just a lot of emphasis on baskets. And I know this is really important for e-commerce because everyone's trying to move up AOV because margins are being eroded. So helping increase units per purchase, driving brand spillover, cross category. This is more or less for the larger brands. I think those are really important to be able to drive much more value to the overall ecosystem and push up those AOVs and all those margins. And then, I think this one's particularly for retailers. I do think them retail media, and this is something that I did at Walmart and other companies. You got to leverage your own assets, your own inventory. And a lot of the emphasis that we would focus on is essentially driving some high value non-purchase actions. So retailers as a whole should think about their whole performance channel, not just, their mix between paid search, affiliates, socials, to be able to drive their own sales, but how do you actually use this on-site inventory to boost those actions? Things like driving app installs, engaging first-time online, offline shoppers. At Sam's Club, this is really important for us and foundational to help build a premise for what, Scan and Go was, because you want to convert those offline shoppers to be online.
And we talked a little bit about it with the retailers, but how do brands measure the success? If they're being pitched like, hey, let's do some mid-funnel marketing efforts, how are they measuring that success?
Assuming that they've aligned on what a campaign is and they're launching it, I would say in campaign, there's a few different things you can do. You can look at traffic to those product and category pages. This is a good indicator that resonates, that there's people's intent. And obviously you want to be able to match the type of demographics you want there. You just don't want to send blind traffic to those pages. You want to make sure it's the type of quality of traffic that you want. But seeing traffic go to those PDP and category pages is helpful. Obviously, beyond that, if you look further down the funnel, add to cart and product views are obviously essential because you want to drive more traffic into those pages, have more people add to cart, and obviously some of those people are going to convert. And then, a lot of what I find is that a lot of these brands are really good at forecasting category sales within a given retailer. And, understanding if those sales and that traffic actually exceeded or did not meet the expectations of the plan. So you'll be able to understand pretty quickly if you're outperforming your baseline, obviously working with your retail media networks and your merchants to help them understand like, hey, how much traffic we had, how much sales we had, how many units we sold. I think those are clear indicators of how you can do things within the campaign. So if you need to make adjustments, either dialing up or down those campaign efforts.
And that brings us perfectly to segment 3, high value non-purchase actions and new product introductions. So mid-funnel strategies, not just about nurturing interest, right? They are essential for launching new products and driving valuable actions beyond the sale itself. So McKinsey stated brands that leverage sneak peeks, demos, targeted promotions at this stage, at this mid-funnel stage, they could generate excitement and accelerate product adoption. So additionally, high-value non-purchase actions such as app installs, which you were just mentioning, online registrations, probably the most valuable thing a retailer could ask for, are increasingly seen as critical signs of intent. So let's explore how brands, retailers get these opportunities and turn them into real results. So Rick, how do brands leverage that mid-funnel tactics for new product launches specifically, both for their own brand and what are you seeing for an entire category?
Yeah, I would say if it's a brand new item or a quarter, it's absolutely a necessary lever for brands to pull and also retailers to build interest and consideration before the purchase happens and understand the intent. So in many use cases also require to help justify shelf space or distribution expansion. So you'll work with a smaller brand who's maybe in 30, 40 stores and online for you to be able to justify expanding. You need to be able to prove to the retailer that one, that your item is desirable, and then two, that you can drive sales and that you're supporting the overall product story. I would say for brands, it means that you have to think about, how do you help understand, articulate the story within the media? And there's a few ways you can measure that as a whole as you're progressing it. It's looking for people who are new to brand, targeting people new to category shoppers. If you're creating a brand new category, that's going to definitely require a lot more upper funnel, both through retail media and through other channels. You're also measuring how it can manage and change shifts in lower funnel performance too. So, if you're driving category consideration and you're seeing a lot more people add to cart, this gives you a good indicator of how things are moving.
Sure. And you just mentioned brands having to prove to the retailer that people want that product. So what are some of the examples of the high value non-purchase actions that brands should target? But more importantly, how can the retail media networks actually support those goals?
Yeah, definitely new to category, new to brand. Those are really important. Obviously, you want to show that there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of traffic coming from different sources as a whole. And then for the retailer themselves, a lot of them are trying to boost their overall AOV. So how are you helping drive overall new shoppers to the category?
And going into segment 4, showcase promotions and basket offers. I've always thought of promotions, I actually have never known where to put them. Are they top of the funnel? That's going to drive some traffic. Are they bottom of the funnel because they're going to make you convert? But it's probably way more accurate to place them mid funnel. So another compelling area, obviously, is the use of these promotions to drive that deeper engagement. So DigiDay stated that limited time offers and dynamic ad formats can create urgency and encourage shoppers to increase their basket size or try new products. So the strategy not only boosts immediate sales, but it also, what we were just mentioning, introduces shoppers to new categories and it fosters that long-term loyalty. So what does it take to design, these promotions that truly will move the needle mid-funnel?
I think it's just integration. Retail media and merchants and brands, have this little bit of tension because, you'll have some offers that are led by the brand themselves and then the partner with the merchant, and then sometimes retail media and in-house marketing teams are left behind a bit. But the most effective way is just tighter collaboration, between these brand categories, merchants, retail media teams, and agencies, because you want to be able to drive these moments to be able to drive as much sales as possible and drive awareness, especially for a new item and new category.
So talk to us about the difference between showcase promotions mid-funnel and then just the other type of immediate promotions or sale promotions mid-funnel.
Yeah, some will be just comp events. Right. Unfortunately, they'll essentially say, we did an offer at this period of time last year on toilet paper or mattresses, and they're just trying to comp those sales. And it doesn't provide a lot of clarity around the role for the promo other than to drive comp sales. And obviously that's important because we're all in the market of doing it, but there are some people who kind of wait for that. It may not be as much incremental, but you really want to think about how is this promotion helping directly support the objective, whether it's comping the sales or driving incremental sales, and it should be measured accordingly.
And then, so what about basket offers? How does that differ? And what are you seeing? Is that really the ultimate way to help brand spillover and cross-category promotion?
It can. I think it, in terms of the larger companies like the Procter & Gamble who have multiple SKUs, multiple categories, it's really helpful. I've seen them do larger offers that have been successful at Walmart and other retailers where they'll be $50 across all the P&G brands. And that's obviously, they're really good at labeling and running these promotions at the period of time. But if you're a smaller organization, you're really just trying to focus on additional SKUs. So instead of limit 1, you want to do limit 2 and be able to stack on. You'll see this a lot in like the Uber Eats and other things where they're trying to drive up these limits and to drive trial, try to drive more units. And that's really important for you all to obviously improve AOV.
All right, so let's get into loyalty programs. I think the gold mine of data for retailers. So segment 5, the role of loyalty programs in retail media networks. They're quickly becoming the cornerstone of retail media networks. According to Forbes, loyalty programs, obviously they provide rich first-party data that enables more precise targeting and measurement. Retail Touchpoints highlights how leading retailers are using loyalty insights to deliver access and exclusive offers and experiences. So companies like Ulta Beauty, 7-Eleven even, are setting the standards for integrating loyalty with retail media and creating a seamless experience for shoppers and brands alike. So Rick, you spent years within this space, within the loyalty space at major retailers and brands. Why are they so vital to the future of retail media?
I think loyalty programs were kind of V1 of retail media.
Yeah.
If you think about it, they were running, when I was at Walgreens, loyalty was tied towards things like the Roto, the Circular. And they were really planned out. So I think a lot of the loyalty programs, they weren't designed to be, retail media programs, but they're essentially the engine behind it. They infuse a ton of first-party data. They have organized structures in terms of how you think about individual shoppers. They're capturing information that may not be ready. So if you don't have a loyalty program, you're going to be reliant upon different signals. Whereas with a loyalty program, you literally have an explicit person who's signing up, giving information, you reward them from this action, enables precision, targeting, personalization, and then obviously closed-loop measurement. But one of the challenges with those loyalty systems, they weren't set up to be integrated with these retail media networks. So that's a lot of work that retailers are having to do these days to essentially unlock this data.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to ask is how does that happen? Because they are completely different data sets, right? And the retail media networks kind of have built their first-person data and what they're selling off of, not in a silo, but certainly not off the back of the loyalty program. So how are they integrating the loyalty data into RMN strategies? What are the challenges there?
They're working with a lot of different partners. I would say it's super immature in a lot of instances. I would say retailers are using those loyalty programs to unlock that differentiation and then running media against those things, but a lot of it's very manual. Early days when I was at Sam's Club, it was very much manual in terms of targeting against members. But that integration improved, and it really started off with just match rates. So when you think about, obviously, you have a member and you're matching 100% of them and you're refreshing that data, early on, you're getting very low match rates for your offsite display or even onsite. But there's a lot of improvements being done as you work with different partners. And it does take a partner ecosystem to improve this overall health. But, over time, you can get this 80, 90% match rates, which obviously make your media a lot more valuable because you can target individual shoppers.
And let's dive in. Segment 6, loyalty data, driving targeting measurement value. Looking ahead, privacy regulations obviously are evolving. Third-party cookies, some days I hear they're disappearing, some days I hear they're not. Loyalty data, it's becoming the gold standard for targeting and measurement. It's, probably the only way that retailers in the future are going to be able to access such personal data about you because you are literally signing up for them. So according to Ad Exchanger, brands and retailers that are harnessing that loyalty data, they build what some call a customer data engine, enabling smarter campaigns, better attribution. So the shift, obviously, is opening up opportunities for innovation and collaboration across the industry. So how can brands and retailers work together to unlock that full potential of loyal-driven retail media? And the second part of that question that I have is the brands don't have that information, right? The retailers have that. So in this new era of safety of personal data and everything of that nature, how are you seeing them work together to really unlock and maximize it?
Yeah, it starts with just intent. The brands as a whole, when you think about the earlier days of retail media networks, they kind of saw this as a tax, and it was essentially set up that way to some degree. But I think it's really beneficial for the brands that come to the table with essentially assuming that it's necessary to run retail media. And they need to come to the table with a little bit more understanding of like, what's my target budget? What's my ROI? They need to be able to share information with the retailer on what their sales targets are. And they are working with the merchants, but in some cases they're not working as closely with the retail media teams as possible. Share some consumer insights, some learnings specifically from historical retail media campaigns on what works and what doesn't, and then how they can build more measurable success. And just think of it like not just a campaign, but a larger journey. And I think that's one of the bigger things, because some brands will run short media campaigns and expect the world from it. And I find that the most productive partnerships are when they co-own the outcome. And that's really hard to get, but you really need a good partnership between the brands, the merchants, and the retail media teams, and be able to kind of have an honest conversation around what performance looks like and what the long-term value.
And when you're thinking about that long-term journey and the different campaigns that you're going to run, do you start with that plan, or do you run a media campaign first, see how people reacted to it, and then build from there? When you think about the media campaigns versus the journey, how do they come together and the strategy behind it?
It's going to depend on the brand. I would say some brands, you'll see that they're already in stores and they're already running promotions. So a lot of them are just trying to comp and create new promotions. They have historically always been speaking with merchants of trying to drive more demand. And a lot of it's trying to say, hey, I want to get placements in your savings books or your circular, or be able to get store signage. So they're already trying to build these media plans, and then they're just adding on some of the digital elements of it historically. But if you're a brand new category or a brand new brand, you really have to try into it. The easiest way to start if you're a brand new product is just the lower funnel pieces, and just asking for a little bit more information around which categories that we believe are nascent, where you can drive some incremental value. And I think it's just a collaboration. But the way I kind of look at it, and one of the things I've noticed in my career, is that a lot of these brands aren't spending enough time with the retail media teams, like demanding like MBRs, general plans. They're just trying to run a campaign, trying to get results, then working through the merchants. And that is not a good combo, because then you end up not getting the most premium inventory possible, and also aligned plans.
So what's the future look like for loyalty-driven retail media? How do brands prepare for it?
Yeah, I think the most critical things that need to be done are just measurement. A lot of the work that needs to be done there isn't super flashy, but it's critical. Measurement is a huge challenge, better attribution, and especially for, a lot of retailers are starting to create their retail media networks now, and they're not as mature as some of the more incumbents. But better attribution, more consistency, incrementality testing, better predictive demand models, be able to showcase how much more store traffic they're driving, how much more sales, much more unit velocities, versus just like reporting out on figures, i.e. traffic that's coming to the pages. People want more from it. Also, more collaborative audience building. I think that's going to be a necessity as like more brands and retailers are adopting clean rooms. They want to be able to pick which segments they think are valuable and then target certain purchase behavior. And obviously, there's this general fear, especially when you're in a big box, around competitive cross-shopping. People conquesting other brands. That is a tough area, but necessary conversations that you need to have to be able to drive more sales velocity, i.e. There's 6 brands of toilet paper on the shelf, including private label, which is a big issue.
Absolutely. No, to me, that's the scariest one. You go there, they learn, they put it out, and then they don't have to spend the retail. Yeah. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. But, and I also just think this is so fascinating, because the typical customer journey in that funnel doesn't really even exist in the same way, because people are coming and discovering product at all different times now. And it's very hard to say, oh, we take them from awareness and upper funnel all the way through. So that measurement of that mid funnel becomes increasingly important. And it's really exciting to be able to see it more in the mix. So now we are going into our conclusion questions. I'm going to put you in the expert's corner, Rick. A few final questions, tap into your insights, and my personal favorite part of the podcast. So quick questions. You could answer it with one word or expand upon it. What's a strategy everyone's following, but no one is questioning?
I think it's the unexamined accession of bottom funnel tactics. They're relying completely on last click attribution to be able to justify their spend. And obviously that's really important, but you're going to kind of notice that over time you're converting the existing demand, and you need to find new demand. And that's driving more traffic and consideration at mid funnel. And obviously you need to do that lower funnel piece, but I think it's the mid funnel piece is just completely abandoned in some aspects, just because of, the maturity of the category.
Absolutely. What's a trend you think will be on the decline or dead within the next year?
I think a lot of it's just tactical. Most people are responding to outreach from the merchants to be able to drive a campaign. And it's not strategic. There's so much potential when you shift that mindset of like, let's just fill this gap to like, how do we partner together to grow the category? And if you treat them as if you would do with a regular media account, like a Pinterest or a Meta, and just having those conversations versus just running what the merchant wants you to do.
What's the one thing everyone in your industry is afraid to admit?
Standardization of measurement is needed. It's really important. I think it's like trying to play 10 different games with 10 different rule books and then comparing scores. And then you're looking across not just your targeted retail media, but over your overall brand spend. And you're trying to rationalize all these impressions and clicks to something that makes sense. And it's quite difficult when different retailers report out different metrics.
Yeah, this might be the exact same answer, but what's the most controversial opinion you hold?
I would say retail media is often viewed as a way to improve margins for retailers themselves versus trying to drive in foot traffic, trying to help drive more sales. I think it offers a ton of opportunity, but it's lacking that strategic partnership and transparency that's needed to kind of justify ongoing budgets versus just earmarks.
So if you had to bet your career on one prediction, what would that be?
I think brands will eventually have the harder conversation and demand more transparency over the control of their retail media investments, whether it's self-service platforms, whether it's using clean rooms. And obviously there's going to be a bit of tension and friction, but I think it's necessary and needed.
So Rick, thank you so much for being here with us, sharing your insights. Obviously, there's an unbelievable, untapped potential of mid-funnel retail media, and it's the pivotal role of loyalty programs too. So for our listeners, remember that full funnel approach ensures that every stage from awareness to conversion and loyalty work together to drive growth. And what I heard today is that loyalty data is now the key to unlocking smarter, more effective retail media strategies. I know it started there and it's kind of coming full circle and building back off of it. And so as we wrap up, think about how you could apply these strategies to your own business, stay ahead of the curve. Rick, what's one action that you would recommend every brand take today to improve their mid-funnel retail media strategy?
Yeah, I'd say this relates to the theme of the overall podcast is that, complement your lower funnel retail media efforts with non-regrettable use cases for mid-funnel. This means creating engaging, valuable touch points with the customer that aligns, educating them on new products, teasing out upcoming offers, and simply driving more traffic to prime them for conversion in the lower funnel. It's going to be really important to be able to drive better health for your overall retail sales.
Awesome. So where can listeners connect with you, learn more about your work? If you could give out your LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's just LinkedIn. I'm Rick Ton, Rickton on LinkedIn.
Right on. Well, Rick, thank you so much for being here with us today. I look forward to more conversations in the future.
Thanks for having me.